Today's guest is Kyle Conrad. Kyle is a brother and a son. Kyle graduated with a degree in construction management from Chico State. Kyle currently lives here in Bozeman and works in construction management. I've been friends with Kyle for about the past 5 years, and he's someone I feel truly honored and grateful to call a close friend. Me and Kyle have been sitting around having conversations like this probably pretty close to since we've known each other. And so in the last year or so, we decided to start doing this podcast. We've been having a lot of fun doing it, and this was fun to sit down and talk with Kyle and kind of hear what life looks like from his perspective. Enjoy. Kyle, you know how it goes. Where are you from? When were you born? What do you do? Who are you?
I was born in 1987. I was born in Pasadena, California. That's where I'm from.
What's your earliest memory there?
I don't know about my earliest memory, but I would say I have a ton of memories as a young child, just like growing up in our neighborhood playing with all the neighborhood kids. We had a really cool neighborhood that we grew up in the foothills of Pasadena, like so up against the mountains. So we like literally live in the mountains, which is just kind of, I guess, most people don't think about really large mountains in the Los Angeles area, but there are really large mountains in the area and very close by. So, yeah.
Jacob said you guys are mountain people.
Yeah, that's funny.
So he would know.
Yeah, so I would say growing up, like, man, you name it, we did it. We played outside constantly. We really never had shoes on. We're always barefoot. We're always scraped up. Very adventurous. It's funny, like you grew up on a farm, right? But I've had, as pets, I've had a lot of animals.
So, like what kind of animals?
Yeah, so when we were kids, we would team up with like the kids down the street. So there was a brother and sister down the street that were basically the same age, and there was a couple other kids in the neighborhood, and so we'd all pool our money together, and we would go buy animals. And so we'd buy like hamsters, rabbits, bunnies, snakes, lizards, frogs, fish. We had a duck for a while. We had chickens. So we would literally most of the time they're always at one of the kids down the street's house, but like we all kind of owned them and all took care of them. We all purchased them together. So yeah, man, I've had a ton of animals growing up. And that was just our thing. Like it was like it felt like every 6 months or every summer we would buy new animals. And for a while we had a bunch of them all at the same time. You know what I mean? Like you accumulate all this stuff as a kid, or we did rather.
How many animals were harmed in the?
I wouldn't say very many were harmed. Yeah. I mean, we tried to take good care of them. Like we literally bought them and then we raised them. Right. So like, and that was actually a source of income for us. So like when we were probably 10 or 12, we actually went, I can't believe one of the parents did this, but we came up with this idea ourselves. So we had bunnies and we had like 8 of them or 10 of them, right? Like that's, that was like the litter or whatever. And our idea was to go sell them in front of the pet store.
Oh, really?
Swear to God. So we took a cardboard box and some like fold out chairs and we sold bunnies in front of PetSmart.
Did PetSmart care?
I think we eventually got kicked out. but like we sold a handful of bunnies like really quickly because we sold them cheap. And that's how we got our cash. So then we would like recycle the money and buy more animals or buy more like supplies for the animals. So that was just kind of something that's like, it's just like interesting. We always had animals around. We, for the duck that we got, we dug a pond in my neighbor's front yard without asking their parents. And when I say a pond, like I mean like a pretty big pond. Like we dug it like 18 inches deep, probably like the size of this room. And then when the parents came home, they were pissed.
I bet.
Yeah. The duck didn't last long.
What were you guys? Did you just run a garden hose into this pond?
Yeah, we like tarped it. We like tarped the bottom of it.
Oh, damn. You guys thought about this.
Yeah. And then we tarped the bottom of it like with a blue tarp. And then, yeah, we ran a garden hose in it.
Okay, so how much older is Chase than you?
5 years.
And then Cole's in the middle. So there's three of you. Is it all three of you doing a lot of this stuff?
Mostly Cole and I. I mean, Chase was a little bit older than he didn't participate like when we got older. So it was mostly Cole and I and like the neighbor kids that were the same age. But yeah, I mean, we would do when we were younger. I mean, we did everything, man. Like that's like when the X Games were going on. So like we rollerbladed, we skateboarded, we BMX biked. Like we were into extreme sports, you know. I know they were popular back then, right? So like we would do all kinds of stuff. Like my dad built a jump like out of like, you know, out of wood, plywood and 2x4s. So he built like a jump for us. So we would come in off our rollerblades and come down. We lived on a really steep hill kind of at the corner. So we'd like gain a bunch of speed, come around the corner, and then we would like launch off this jump into our driveway. But then we had a basketball hoop. So then we have a basketball hoop that was like adjustable. So like we would try to dunk, right?
On rollerblades.
Off of rollerblades, off of hitting a jump. So stuff like that, you know, like we were just kind of, we would do stuff like that all the time. Yeah, we had a ton of fun.
What's the fondest memory you have besides all of it with your brothers?
The fondest memory I have with my brothers,
or just growing up there, being a kid there?
I would just say like in general, like we had like real like freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we lived in a neighborhood where it was one-way street, so cars were like driving really slow because the streets are really narrow. They're, you know, literally like they were like 10 feet wide, so you can barely just fit a car down them.
This was like late 90s, mid
to late 90s. Yeah. So like, you know, we would always just play in the streets, right? Like we played baseball, basketball, anything you could imagine. We played in the streets, like just because you could, and it wasn't dangerous. So, everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood. So yeah, it was like complete freedom. And you know, we'd like walk into people's houses without knocking on their door because we knew them so well. Right. And like, whether old people, young people. So just imagine 4, 5, 6 kids just walk into your house. And then we'd be like, hi, how are you? Like we'd hang out with them. And they most of the time they would like enjoy to see us. They were like, we had a good time.
It sounds like The Sandlot.
Yeah, kind of, for sure.
What was it like having Mark and Gayla as parents? What do you remember just as a kid and them being your parents?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, kind of along the same lines, like they gave us a lot of freedom. And I think, you know, I think they're smart enough to realize that like they knew that like that's the kind of neighborhood they wanted to live in, so that they could have their kids do all those things, and it wouldn't have been as a pleasurable experience for them if we lived in a kind of a different style of neighborhood, because then they would have had to worry more, right? Like they would have worried about us getting hit by cars, or like they wouldn't the neighbors wouldn't be so trustworthy, or so I think, like they gave us a lot of freedom. Yeah, I mean, my mom and dad were and still are spectacular parents. We were with them all the time. My mom didn't work for the first, I mean, there was a handful of years that my mom didn't work. And so that meant that she was always home raising us. But even when she did work, she was always there. So like she would take us to school. She would pick us up from school. So we didn't know any different. It was like my mom's always around. And same with my dad. So my dad would get up at, 5 in the morning or so, 5, 6 in the morning. Usually he was gone by 6. And then, he worked for himself as a truck driver. So he would be home, sometimes at noon. Sometimes he'd be home at 9 in the morning. Sometimes he'd be home at 5, right? But I would say for the most part, my dad was home by like 2:30. I would say it was probably his average from like 5 a.m. to 2:30. And so he was home every single day also, which is kind of rare in the trucking industry. But because we lived so close to Los Angeles and there's so many ports, there's so much like business being done, right? That's like there's all kinds of materials that are coming off of the ships. And then they go to distribution warehouses throughout the LA area. Like that's what my dad's business was. His main client was like oil companies. So like Shell Oil Company has a refinery in Los Angeles. And so he was a contractor for Shell for probably 30 something years. But then he had a bunch of other kind of suppliers that would sell motor oil. So my dad like shipped mostly petroleum products, motor oil, grease. And so like, when you go to AutoZone or.
So he wasn't driving like a tanker. He was driving
No,
like
he was driving
bottles.
like a.
Yeah, like
Well,
package.
so like it started out like when we were kids, and I remember this just being like a kid, like we would get sick, right? And like we'd go to work with my dad because like that's who could take care of us. And so like we'd jump in the truck, and that was fun. Like we'd get to go to like these oil refineries as a kid, and we have to like sometimes we'd have to hide because you're not allowed to bring a kid to a freaking oil refinery.
Did he just have a day cab on his truck?
Yeah. And so like we'd have to hide like in the front, like in between the dash and the seat, and like he'd throw like a jacket over our head. So we'd pull in and out of the gate, like we'd hide in the truck or whatever. And that wasn't always the case. Sometimes it was like if he was going to a particular supplier, that it wouldn't matter.
I can picture Mark hiding you guys right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, so in the old days, like all the oil was shipped in like 55-gallon drums. And so, and that's, my dad was like a private, he's have his own business. And so he's a private contractor, like no union or anything like that. And so he actually loaded the trucks. So like the way I understand it is like in the 70s and 80s, like you loaded your own truck. Well, then that like changed to like, then they had people loading your truck for you. And because there was like liability issues or like union issues where like you couldn't take somebody else's job that was like supposed to be like the loader of the trucks or whatever. And so it went from 55-gallon drums to like pallets of like boxed, oil. So that was just kind of an interesting,
that
I guess, it was like kind of interesting that my dad would ship 55-gallon drums full of oil.
it makes me think of this, and I want to try to stay on topic with what it was like for you growing up. But when we would load the hay trailers, we would always say, whoever stacks the trailer is the one who's driving.
Mm.
And that is because, like, if you fuck up, don't stack it right,
Mm-hmm.
don't strap it right,
Mm-hmm.
you lose a bunch of bales of hay driving down the road. So you're the one driving, like you know what I mean? And I wouldn't want to drive the trailer if somebody else stacked it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be uncomfortable if I know bales are gonna be falling off the back. Or gonna take turns real slow because I feel more comfortable if I'm driving the trailer, if I'm the one that loaded it, and definitely if I'm the one that strapped it down.
Yeah, my dad would probably feel the same way.
Yeah.
And he got frustrated with a while because like he'd have to wait for somebody to load his trailer. And he's like, dude, I'm waiting around for like an hour or two just because he technically couldn't, got to a point where like they wouldn't allow him to load his own trailer. And he got in trouble for like loading his own trailer several times. Because he's like, dude, I want to get on the road. Like, I don't want to wait for somebody to load my trailer. I'll just load it myself and I'm out of here.
Okay, so.
But yeah, so my dad was home. My dad was kind of unique in the trucking industry. One is he owned his own business, and two, he was not a long haul truck driver. Most people think of truck drivers as long haul. I don't know that my dad ever did long haul. I think he went to Arizona one time, like for one overnight, or maybe it was even like just a long day because he went to like Phoenix or something, which is like 5 hours away. But the farthest my dad would go is like San Diego. He'd go to San Diego for the day, drop a load or pick up a load, and then come back.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was so my parents were always around. My parents were involved with our school. They went to every single sporting event. They took us to practice. All three of us. I mean, sometimes we had practice 3 days a week. And when we got older, we had like three practices a week for like club soccer. So, and then we got to the point where we could drive or whatever. But yeah, my parents were super involved.
Besides them always being around for you, which seems like one of the most important things a parent can do, is there something you can think of that they individually or collectively taught you that you still kind of implement or use today or has guided you throughout your life? And there's probably a bunch of things they did that you wouldn't even notice, but
I would say collectively, if you were to combine my parents together, like a combined lesson is that like, what you can do with the resources you have, how should I say this? Like, you can live a great life. You just have to work at it. And so like you might not have the means to do something, but you can work to figure it out. So, my parents kind of demonstrated a ton of examples like that where like we lived in Pasadena. Pasadena is kind of a tale of kind of two cities, right? It has, there's people that are super wealthy in Pasadena. Then there are people that are lower income in Pasadena. And there's kind of, then there's the middle class, right? But the middle class doesn't really represent Pasadena. It's kind of like, I would say the majority of kind of the influence is either the upper class or the lower class. And so I would say that the middle class doesn't really have good representation. At least that's what my parents thought. It's hard for me to say now. I haven't lived there in 20 years and wasn't an adult when I was there. And so the Pasadena schools, public schools, were not really good. And you get exposed to a lot of the kind of lower income folks. And so my parents didn't want some of those values to rub off on us. And so when we were in elementary school, elementary to middle school, I guess for Chase, but for Cole and I, we switched school districts. And so we went 2 cities over to go to school. Well, in order to do that, you have to there's a process, right? It's like hard. It's like you have to apply, you have to get a permit, and you have to get a permit every single year. And so you have to do that process every single year. And you have to behave, right? Like if you have bad behavior or bad grades, like they kick you out. And so, where like if you live in that city, like they're not going to kick you out, right? Because you're like you belong there, right? Or there's a spot allocated for you rather. So like stuff like that, like my parents worked really hard at like giving us opportunities that they didn't actually have, right? Like, so you didn't have that opportunity, so you had to go make it happen, right? So we had to go to another city and apply for a permit. Yeah, and then I would just say like my parents worked really hard and made the best of every situation. So they would go out of their way to like take something that was just like average and make it much, much better. And so they did that for our family. They did that for us individually. And then ultimately, they did that as a whole kind of throughout their whole life. I mean, my parents have lived a much better lifestyle than you would live on a truck driver and a secretary's budget, right? So they got creative and figured out a way to like live probably way better than most of their peers for damn sure. Mm-hmm. People that have the same job make the same amount of money. My parents got really creative on how to do more with less.
So because you guys were in a different school district, your mom would drive you to school every day?
Yeah, when we were until we could drive. So yeah. It wasn't far. It was like 15 or 20 minutes. So it was like two cities over. 15 or 20 minutes. But then again, like look at the way I say that, right? Like I just said it wasn't that far. It was 15 or 20 minutes, but it wasn't, because like I grew up kind of like just knowing that was like, well, that's what we did. There was more effort. Fine. Like, but it was more effort, right? And that was the easy part. Driving us to school, I think, was the easy part. Like,
I think
dealing with all the permits and stuff. Like we went to school there illegally. And so like my parents used friends' addresses to fake the system for years. And like my parents' friends allowed them to use their address, right? But like then there were times when we were like kind of like we were kind of being like chased around by the school board about like, where do you guys live? And if you guys are interviewed, tell them that you live at this address, kind of a thing. And so like there was effort there. And then like, I don't really remember Chase or Cole. I think Chase maybe struggled a little bit with a couple classes, but Cole was a pretty good student for them, at least is what I remember. But there were a few years where like I was not a good student, and so I was borderline like gonna get kicked out. And like I remember that conversation with my mom, like, somewhat regularly, like, hey dude, if you don't get your grades up, you're gonna get kicked out of the school district.
That made me think that's another thing they taught you too, though, is that it's worth it to put in the effort. If you put in the extra effort, essentially, you can have a lot better things for yourself. Mm-hmm. Which you just said, yeah, it's only 15 minutes every day, mm-hmm. 2 ways, and whatever they had to go through to get you in a different school district. But the fact that they put in that much effort for their kids, mm-hmm. not for themselves, but for your future, it says a lot about who they are. But it's obviously going to rub off on you and teach you. I mean, they're like indirectly teaching you things. Yeah, this seems, why can't we just go to the school we're at with everyone else here? But they had the foresight to see that and put all that extra time and effort in.
Yeah, and I think about that. There were all kinds of lessons where I would say they pushed us to like do more. And it it's like a lesson that you learn, and then it sticks with you for life, but like in sports, I remember, um, I was a fairly good soccer player. Um, we all were fairly good soccer players, and so we played competitive soccer, um, club soccer, and after my sophomore year, so like freshman and sophomore year of high school, I played on a team um that was probably about where my ability was. I was probably one of the better players on that team. Um, but in general, it was kind of like right where I was probably at, which was kind of middle of the pack, right? I was not the best, and I did not play on the best team. I didn't even play in the best league. Um, uh, and I remember trying out for a bunch of teams that were the level up, right? So a level up or two from where I was. When I say I tried out for a bunch of teams, I literally tried out for about 10 different teams. And so that means like I drove all over Los Angeles trying out for teams for like a year. And every team I went, they were like, "Yeah, no, you're not that good. You're probably not going to play very much on this team. Like you're going to ride the bench." And so like, that happens like 10 coaches that, maybe it's not 10, but it was definitely 6 or 8. So 6 or 8 coaches that tell you like, "Hey, you're not going to play very much. Like you'll be a sub for us." And club soccer, the way it worked at the time was like, if you're a sub playing gold or premier, you literally will get like 5 or 6 minutes a game out of 90. And you're definitely not going to play in the big tournaments, like unless somebody gets hurt or whatever. So I was like, that I don't want to just like ride the bench. And so I ended up making a team that was better than the team that I was on. But it was a bunch of players kind of just like me, like really scrappy guys, but like, and none of us were, there were a couple of guys that were extremely talented, but most of us were all like pretty damn good, but we're definitely not at that higher level. And so I got on that team, and we went undefeated that year. We freaking played really well. And it was a lot of fun, tons of fun. That's obviously a lot of fun when you win. So we went undefeated that year, which means we went to the league above. So we made it to the best league. But I guess that whole experience of like don't settle, right? Like trying out for 6 or 8 teams and trying out for a team for a year, or teams for a year, and basically, most of them all telling you you're probably not going to play. I remember after like trying out for 6 teams, like sitting in the kitchen with my mom and dad, and I'm like, probably just not going to play anymore. Like, if I'm not going to play at a high level, I don't really want to play. And they're like, no. They're like, that's not an option. And I remember crying, and they're like, no, man, like you're just going to keep working at it. And yeah, so that's like a lesson, right? Of like, you may not be that good today, right? But like you might be in 2 years might go by, right? And you'll be better. Anyway, and so like that was a kind of a cool story. Like, I ended up playing college soccer, and 99% of the people who were even in the better league than I never played college soccer, right? So that kind of lesson is always stuck with me, of like, you just got to keep grinding it out and trying, and you can do better for yourself, but you just have to put yourself in a better situation. Because if you put yourself in a better situation, you'll be surrounded by better people, right? So in sports, that's you're putting yourself around better players, and you automatically will become better because you're literally just your competition's harder.
Yeah. Were you crying because you didn't want to play or because you kept not making teams?
No, I definitely wanted to keep playing, but like I was super discouraged.
That's insanely important because if you think about that feeling you have, I'm not good enough. And if you just say, that's it, I stop, I just don't play anymore. That's something you could be applying that for the rest of your life to everything. Anything you try to do, you're saying, you know what, I'm not good enough. So I can't do that because I'm not good enough. But I mean, just think of that simple thing. If they had just said, yeah, you're right, you're not good enough at soccer, don't play anymore. And then everything else for the rest of your life.
I would say actually more so the lesson is don't think about it the way that I was thinking about it, which is an all or nothing mindset. If I can't do this thing, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, well, you're avoiding all the great things that it does for you, right? You're avoiding all of the benefits because you're only focused on the negative, right? You're like, well, I didn't make that team. So had I not played, had I kind of stopped playing, then, I mean, my life, I think, would look extremely different than it looks now. But you're right. Like, if you take the wrong lesson out of that and you just quit, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. The
lesson could have been when things are hard,
stop.
Don't do them.
Right. And yeah, so,
so this will all, I feel like this is all going to come full circle when we get to like your life in the last 10 years or 15 years and what you've done and why you've made choices you've made.
mm-hmm.
I'm sure you could look at something like that and I'm sure there's a handful of things if you really reflected on what it was like growing up with your parents and just all those subtle things that you didn't realize they were teaching you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other things I think with my parents, like they would just, I wouldn't say they've taught us this. I mean, I guess they taught us through their actions, but my parents have lived a kind of a non-traditional lifestyle. And like, my parents never, my dad was a sole proprietor, he owned his own business. And then my mom, was a secretary. And so like neither one of them had health insurance until I graduated from college. So like no health insurance, basically zero savings. When I say zero savings, like maybe a couple $1,000, here or there, kind of throughout the years, and then no retirement. So they didn't have like a normal job, right? They didn't have like a normal job. They didn't live like a normal lifestyle. So that's and they had, because of that, they had to get really creative on some of the things that they did in life and how they how to accomplish those. Know.
And maybe we'll have to ask Mark when he does the podcast, or did they, so if when Mark was going to buy his truck, would he finance it or did he save up then buy a truck?
You mean like his original one?
Yeah.
Like his big truck.
Yeah, whatever he had. Yeah. What do you have, a Peterbilt, Kenworth?
No, he had a Mac for a while, and then before that he had a white.
Okay, yep.
And he had something else too. I think maybe both of them were whites.
I know white tractors. I don't know if that's the same as.
Yeah, it's probably the same company. Yeah, I would imagine it's the same company. So he had two trucks for a while. Like he had a backup truck that he basically like only drove a few times a year, and he just like kept it in good maintenance so that like it was his backup. I think he got those for really cheap. I don't know, but like he bought them. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Like he bought those in the 70s, and they were probably like pretty new then. And he drove those, and all the way to like the mid to late 90s. So he drove like 70s, diesels until like the mid 90s. This was a long time. You're driving a 25-year-old truck. And then
What year's the Suburban that he has now?
2002 or 2001 or 2002. Yeah.
The 22-year-old truck.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a little different than it's like your
know.
livelihood,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think they worked good though. Like, and then he bought the Mac. He bought stuff, that he thought was in good shape that was pretty cheap. I think that, and then he owned a few trailers. He had a handful of his own trailers, and then sometimes he would rent trailers. They'd charge him to rent them or whatever.
I asked mainly just because I wondered what the relationship was with money, because I know people, like, it seems like everything's financed and loaned now, and I just wondered if people would buy everything cash then, and just how they basically, you were saying you lived a abnormal lifestyle per their occupations, so I just wondered what their sort of strategy was.
Yeah, so my I can't say whether my dad financed the trucks or not. I don't know. I if I take a guess, I would just say he paid cash for them outright. Because then I think anyway. So that's I would just take a guess there. But my parents were really creative and really smart, and had a lot of gumption to do what they did with the houses. So my dad moved into the neighborhood that we grew up in the early 70s, I think, like 72 or something like that.
What is that word you used?
Gumption. Gumption is like balls. Like you have a lot of, like, you're going to go, give it your all and put your ass on the line kind of a thing. So my dad moved in that neighborhood and it's like 72, and he moved in because he liked the neighborhood. So like he fell in love with the neighborhood. And this was before my mom and dad even had like started dating or whatnot. And so he bought a house there and kind of remodeled that house. It did an addition on it and lived there for a handful of years. And then there were 2 vacant lots up the street on the same street. So like one right next door to the house that he owned, and then one across the street and up 2 doors. So all within like literally like 75 yards of each other. There's 2 vacant lots. And so my dad bought one lot. And so my mom and dad met and ended up getting married and having Chase. And then my dad had buddies who were contractors. And my dad was handy, and so he had kind of worked with
He's still pretty damn handy if you look at that shop he just built.
Yeah, he's super handy. And so he
and Gilla.
Yeah, him and my mom built the damn garage by themselves, basically. So my dad had buddies that worked in construction, so my dad would work part-time with them. Like whenever he was slow with trucking, he would go work on a framing job or, go like do form work for a slab or whatever. And so my dad kind of learned the construction trade kind of that way. My dad's father also was in construction. So my grandfather had a construction company in Pasadena. Him and his brothers had a construction company in Pasadena. And my grandfather was really, it's my understanding that he was really good with concrete, and he was really good with CMU block. And so he could build like CMU block walls really good is one of the, like what my dad said. He was like really good at it. So he taught my dad to do that. And my dad's actually really good at building block walls too.
Okay.
So I guess anyway, so my dad knew construction. So my parents took out a construction loan and built a house, right? Because the house they were in was small, and they had a growing family, so they're going to grow out of it. I would imagine they were kind of growing out of it at the time, and so they were like, we need a bigger house and a bigger garage. And so my parents built what would have been like a really, really nice house, like in the early 90s. Like kind of went, at the time, probably all out, kind of like built a 2,400 square foot house with a 3-car garage and a really nice house. And so I would imagine that was like quite the stretch on the construction loan and like paying the bills month to month of like paying the mortgage and then paying the construction loan every month. And so my dad was like managing the project, but also working on it. Like he would work, he'd get home at 2:30 and he would work until 10 o'clock at night on the house, like whatever he could do, infill, like between contractors being there. And so they built that house and then they moved into it when they rented the other house out. And then a couple of years later, they bought the other lot that was available, a vacant lot, and built another house on it. So same thing, construction loan. My dad general contracted it, and so what would happen is, again, the way I understand my parents' finances was that they had 3 mortgages, but they could only pay 2. And so it was a game, right? So like this house would get paid for by the other house, and then this money would get paid for the other house. So like, let's say you owe $2,000 here, and you owe $2,000 here, and you owe $2,000 here, just to keep it even, right? So you would pay this mortgage. They would get rent money from the other 2 houses. This money they would get from rent would pay the other mortgage, and then they get rent money from another house, pay the other mortgage. And so the way the timing worked out was like my parents really couldn't afford their own mortgage. And so they were just kind of moving money around month to month to cover the mortgage. So like maybe one was due on the 1st, and then the other one was due on the 15th. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so there was like a money game going on. So
that's all that goes on with money.
Yeah. So they couldn't afford for a while. I think there were times when like they couldn't afford their own mortgage, which they didn't really need to, right? Because they were just moving money around. Over time, obviously, the rent went up on the houses and the mortgages stayed the same. And so they made, $200 or $300 a month, and then 30 years later, they made $1,000 or $2,000 a month on the mortgage or whatever, right? So then that was kind of their savings. But that's like something that's, most people won't do that. Most people don't. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress. I remember times when we were growing up that, let's say the renters had moved out and there were months in between when like it wasn't rented. Those months were really stressful for my parents because they're losing that money, and therefore now they have 2 mortgages to pay, and they already can't afford one of them, and now they have to pay the other one. And so there was a time when one of the houses was sitting empty for quite a long time. They couldn't rent it for the price that they needed to rent it at. And so it sat for a while, and those were hard times. But as kids, we didn't really I don't think it really mattered.
Probably barely knew,
we barely knew.
They were really
I look back
out,
now, and I can kind of pinpoint some things, but like we never knew when we were kids. Yeah, we never knew that it was. Yeah.
So, what was high school like? What was middle or high school like? You're the youngest of 3. Pasadena. You're getting driven to school. What was the school like?
Growing up in the LA area was awesome. So we grew up, and we played soccer, right? We played baseball too. But like growing up in the LA area, you get exposed to a lot of people from around the world. And so that was fun, man. Like, we were always hanging out with like a lot of Latins, right? So like people from all over the world, whether it was like, Mexico, there's tons of Mexicans in Los Angeles, right? I think it's I think it's the second largest population of Mexicans in the world outside of Mexico is Los Angeles. So tons of Mexicans, which was a lot of fun. Argentinians, Brazilians, so people from, and then several, a lot of Europeans, right? So playing sports was a lot of fun. We were a competitive family, and so we like growing up like competitive sports, and then we got along with and played with a lot of other competitive families too. So like we kind of hung with these different families, and we had we had some of the same coaches, and so we'd go to tournaments, right? And like we had a lot of fun kind of playing sports. But then in school too, you're exposed to a lot of different people, a lot of different cultures, so that was cool. High school was a blast, dude. High school was so much fun. It was so cool. I mean, I had older brothers, and so Chase had just graduated. By the time I got to high school, but Cole was still there, so Cole and I overlapped in high school. Yeah, I mean, Chase. So like, yeah, Chase and Cole were really good soccer players, and so by the time I got there, they're like the coaches and like the other families that also had like, they might have had a brother in between Chase and Cole, right? And so like, by the time I got there, it was like the coaches knew I was coming. High school was fun, man. It was we were pretty popular kids.
Find that hard to believe.
Yeah, we were pretty popular kids. I would say we kind of flourished in high school. We had cool cars.
What was your first car you drove?
That yellow pickup.
Have I seen it?
Yeah, I showed you a picture of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so my first car that I drove it for, I guess, a couple years.
This was a Ford?
Yeah, so 1956 Ford F100.
That's pretty gangster.
Yeah, and it was super nice at the time. It had just been kind of restored a few years earlier. So yeah, it's like bright yellow, like hot rod kind of bright yellow car.
So obviously you're popular. You're a Mexican in a yellow pickup truck.
Yeah, and like if you think about LA, right? Like Los Angeles Southern California is like the car capital of the world. Like you want to see cool cars, like they're in the Los Angeles area, right? And so
by the way, I don't think Kyle's Mexican at all. It's just my running joke.
And so to have a cool car in Los Angeles is a big deal. Or I wouldn't say it's a big deal. Like it's a thing, right? Like people have cool cars in Los Angeles, whether they're new or old or whatever. Yeah, so like that's a like an important memory is, just like car culture and like hot rod culture. We spent a lot of time around classic cars, specifically like muscle cars, hot rods, and my dad. I would consider my dad like for sure a hot rodder. He grew up in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, kind of like in the
golden age.
In the golden age of hot rods and in the golden location of hot rods. Like my dad has a lot of stories of like literally like when he was in high school, he would go out and drag race. And so he'd drag race for money. He would drag race for $20. $20 in 1968 was a shitload of money.
What do you think do you think is that 200 or $2,000? No.
I think it's, in my opinion, it's more than 200, right? But think about that. Like $200 as a high school kid, just out of a race.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. And so my dad would literally go home on like a Friday night and put his slicks on, put like different wheels and tires on, and go out and race.
That's pretty sick.
And so he spent like a lot of time wrenching on shit and fixing shit up. And so, yeah, we always had like high horsepower cars hanging around. So we'd like go to car shows and just kind of be in that environment.
What was your first official or real job?
My first official job was a lifeguard. Well, I guess not. Kind of like half of a lifeguard, half of like daycare. So the Rose Bowl, like the stadium, the Rose Bowl Stadium is right there in Pasadena, and they have an Olympic training center for swimming there. And so somehow Chase got a job there in the summer as like a daycare, like camp counselor thing. And then Cole got a job there. It's a super easy job. You get paid like $6 or $7 an hour at the time. And then I got a job there. So that was like my first job was like a camp counselor one summer. I think I was a freshman in high school. So I was like 15. That was like my first real job that I got, I guess, paid for.
That's probably not a bad gig, huh?
It was cool as hell. It was cool. It was like summertime at the pool.
Yeah.
Like, hot chicks running around.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be looking at everyone. I'm trying to keep you safe.
Yeah, so it was like sweet. So like worked at a pool and then we played with kids. We would play like tag and football and play sports, all day long. And then like so it was from like 9 to 2:30 or something. It's great.
Sweet, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it around to go to this?
Let me just check.
Yeah.
Let's find out. Hopefully not. It's a good call. We're good to go.
Miles got you covered.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Miles.
Yeah. Thank you, Miles.
Should I tell Miles I have a podcast he could watch sometimes?
No, we should bring him on.
That's a good idea.
Find out more about him.
All right. So high school, anything like that sticks out to you, like a really good memory, fun memory, crazy memory, just from high school, senior prank, first girlfriend, anything, just anything.
I had a long-term girlfriend in high school. That was cool.
What age did that relationship start?
I think I started dating her at 17. Yeah, so like late 17.
Okay.
But remember, I'm a year older, right? So like I graduated high school at 19.
Okay.
I was a fucking badass motherfucker. I guess we can go back. We can go back.
I'm old enough to buy beer. I'm still in high school.
We can go back. I did first grade twice. I did first grade 2 times.
I cut you off when you said your mom was saying, Kyle, you're going to get kicked out of this school. Mm-hmm. And that was middle school? Or was that high school?
That I love the way you said it. Kyle, you're going to get kicked out of school if you don't get your shit together.
That's essentially what she was saying.
Yeah. And but like, that's what she was saying, but she wasn't saying it that way. So we can go back. So like, so first off, like I can't really explain them. I had, challenges with like school really from the beginning, right? So I took first grade twice.
That's insane. How can someone make a kid take first grade twice? Like what kind of...
Well, so
all right, maybe, yeah.
I can tell you, well, this is interesting, right? Because this stuff kind of can stick with you, right? It stuck with me for a long time. Was it like if you take first grade twice, you're automatically dumb, right? And so then you think you're dumb, right? Think about that. Like kids make fun of you. You're like, what's wrong with me? Like why?
I'm trying to figure out.
Right. And so I don't. So if, and this is really funny. Like, if my mom has an interesting, she was there, right? She was the adult in the situation. So, you should figure out her side. We should figure out her side of the story. But, I couldn't read well, or I wasn't reading well. I wasn't probably writing very well, right? Like, so my understanding is that, like, if you can't read at a certain level, like, you have to take first grade twice. And so I took first grade twice. So I started going to a different school district in the 5th grade. And so I think I struggled with, first through 4th probably. But I was like, I was passing barely, I guess, probably. There goes your alarm. And so I went to a different school district in the 5th grade, and I went to a much better school district. And so that's when I think it became very apparent that I was behind, because the level of, this is my understanding. Again, I was a little kid, but like the level of teaching and the level of academic kind of ability when I went to the other school district was like, there was a difference there. Mm-hmm. So I think anybody probably would have like struggled, right? But like I was already struggling at the other school district. So then I come over to this other one and I'm like, oh, like these kids are smart.
Sorry, I keep fucking sitting my bottle down and making sure the stickers turn. Such a fucking idiot. Continue.
And so
podcasting 101, kids.
Right. So then I had some really cool teachers. I've had really cool teachers a lot throughout my whole life, but or I have many examples of really good teachers. So I got into 5th grade, brand new school. I don't know anybody, right? Like I'm in a whole new environment. And so like that on top of like I'm struggling in school. So like I fucking hated it. Like that first year it was terrible. I remember crying all the time on the way home or to school.
You seem like a crier.
I am a crier. And so yeah, I was like failing the first semester, if you will. So halfway through school, I switched teachers, which was like also very difficult. So that's also something like my mom, it's like, all right, we're gonna find something new. Right? Like that didn't work, we're gonna try something else. And so like my mom initiated that, right, to like change teachers. And so I changed teachers and changed to Miss Topalian. And when I got into Miss Topalian's class, she just liked me. She kind of knew how my personality was. She kind of embraced it, like, and so she was like, "Oh, this kid's like got some personality. He's witty. He's like, he'll give like, I was like, I would speak up and like I had a lot of energy, right? So she knew how to like shift my energy and to be like, okay, Kyle, like I know you want to go out and play outside right now, and like you're kind of disrupting the class with like what you have to say or your comment or whatever. So she knew how to like redirect that energy, but also like demand respect. And so I ended up learning a lot in that class because of just kind of the way that she kind of commanded the classroom. So then I actually started doing really well that year. I kind of had a big turnaround. I went from like having, F's and D's on things to like A's and B's. Yeah, but that was probably when I like specifically when my mom was like, we have to figure this out because otherwise you're going to get kicked out of school. And not because I wasn't trying. I was fucking trying. It was that like I was just failing at trying. So it wasn't like I was a bad kid. Like I wasn't doing anything bad. I just was getting bad grades and I was trying a lot. And then it happened in high school too, like freshman and sophomore year of high school. Like I was trying and I was just not doing well. And it was like not overall, it was just like one class. Mm-hmm. But if you get an F or a D in one class, like your grades are shit. You can get B's and C's on all the other ones. And then you're now below. We had to maintain like above a 3.0. And so, or above like a 2.7 minimum or something like that. And so if you got anything below a 2.7, and I'm making, I don't know the numbers exactly, but if you got anything below like a 2.7, like you could get threatened to get kicked out. Do you know how
Yeah.
Okay, you know how like 3.0, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you get 3.0, it's all B. If you like, it's all averaged at Bs.
I don't know if you remember, Matt was saying, shout out to Matt Wobshanak.
Matt, what up, dude?
He was saying when he went to summer school,
Mm-hmm.
I think he went to summer school every year he's in high school, and he
Mm-hmm.
said that those teachers were so much better. And it was he didn't know if it was just the attention, he was getting more attention because it was a smaller class, but I mean it sounds like a lot of it was that teacher, just a different what.
Yeah, so I went to summer school a lot.
Yeah, you said, I remember you saying that when we talked about that.
I went to summer school a lot because I think my mom knew that like I just needed, and it's still true to this day, right? Like I'm not a quick learner. Like I have to, it takes me a while to like pick something up. Once I pick it up, I can get really good at it. But it's always taken me longer to more reps to do something. And so my mom kind of knew that, and like so then I would take summer school. But what I was laughing about was like, the cool thing about summer school is you would meet all the girls from other schools. And so like, because they would have summer school at one school, but then there'd be like, let's say there's 4 schools in the district, they would just like have summer school at one of them. And so then all the girls from like these other schools would come, and you'd be like, fucking what's up?
This is my girlfriend. She goes to a different school.
No, you just got to like talk. It would be cool. You have like a little summer fling, and then you'd see them like next summer school, or even like, then you'd see them in high school or whatever, and you already kind of knew who they were. It's fucking sweet.
So funny. I was just thinking, I was going to say, all this you're saying about how long it takes you to learn and how far behind you were, and you were about to tell a story about being 19, graduating high school.
Mm-hmm.
This is all coming from someone who's doing very well for themselves. Like, so for what it's worth, like you're doing very well for yourself, and so
yeah. And I had to learn. So that's kind of a confidence piece, right? And like something switched. It's happened to me. I think I don't know. It happens to me. I go through these periods of time where like I lack confidence, and then I go through a thriving time where my confidence is abundant or whatever. But
or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever.
Or whatever.
And so at some point, like junior,
I'm going to put that a quote. It's just going to be a picture of you. It's going to say, "When my confidence is abundant," or whatever.
Yeah, maybe I should probably fix my speech.
You're fine. Continue.
But I remember like junior year of high school. So this is interesting. So junior year of high school, they opened up what they called the academy, and they just called it the academy. It was the same school, same curriculum, more or less the exact same curriculum, but it was a school inside of my high school. So it was like a subset of classes and a subset of a school as an experiment inside of the regular classes. And so they called it the academy, and but it was basically more or less no different. The difference is that you could, and I don't remember all the differences, but one of the differences is that you could take the tests multiple times. And so if you wanted to improve your grade, you could take the test again and get a better grade. And so I remember taking tests like 2 or 3 or 4 times, maybe never 4 times, like 2, maybe 3 times. And so I would get a D, and I would take it again, and I get better, and then I get a C, and I take it again, and I get a B minus or something like that. And they would either take your best score, or they would average your scores, right? So it'd be like, cool, I had a C or a D, and then I got a C, and then I got a B, right? So now they're going to give me like a C plus, right? It's going to average out. And so it's better to have a C plus than get a D, right? And so whatever. The point is that you could take these exams again, so you could study harder, learn, get better at it. And so that really worked for me. And so not only did that work for me, but it gave me confidence, because I would get like test anxiety. And so I would be taking a test and I'd get worried, and then I would be like, oh shit, like I fucked that last one up. And then I'm going to screw this one up too. Oh shit, I'm going to screw this other one up too. And so then, I gained confidence, because I was like, oh, well, like I'll just take this test. And if I don't do that well, I'll study more and I'll take it again. So I ended up getting much better grades junior year and senior year. I think the academy had something to do with that.
I was thinking, what does it matter how many times you take the test if you really learn the information? You know what I mean?
It shouldn't.
Because
right?
if you take it once and guess and get a good grade, you feel good about yourself, but you didn't learn anything. But if you take it 4 times and you're like, oh, now I get it, because I've done this so many times. I've fucked it up so many times. I now understand what's the right answer and also why. You're essentially more knowledgeable. But if you just, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think 95% of things in life, like you can do them as many times as you want, right? How many things in life are like one and done, right? There are things that are life that are like one and done,
Murder.
Right? Oh, whoa. But you know what I mean? Like most things are like, you can just keep doing them and get better and better and better, right? If you screw it up and you fail, when you try something, you just try again.
Yeah.
I know I'm not supposed to do this on my own podcast, but I really have to pee.
You
so
son of a bitch.
We're going to have to edit this section out.
Oh my God.
Be right back.
Just sit here and look into the camera. Any ladies out there? I'm currently on the dating market, so what's up?
Okay.
I made my shout outs to, I let the dating market of the ladies know I'm single if they want to hit me up. So I don't know if I'll edit that out or not.
There you go.
What the hell were we saying?
Taking tests, and you can take them again and again.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. So I gained a lot of confidence there. I think it coincided with, I was telling you about my junior and senior year of soccer, club soccer. I played on a really good team. And so that, my confidence was up. I was really enjoying that. I guess one interesting kind of thing, it was a really big deal at the time. I think about it often now. Or I should say I don't think about it that often now, but it was a really big deal at the time. So my junior year of high school soccer, not club soccer, high school soccer, we had an extremely good soccer team. We won the league. We went really, really deep into the kind of the regional playoffs.
Just the varsity team.
Yeah. And Cole's on that team.
Nice.
And so we went, well, that was really fun. So we went from like the best team in the league, probably by far, to then that my junior year of high school, I was one of the captains of that team, and we got last place in league and had the worst record of school history.
Oh, really?
Yep. And it was, I was the co-captain. And
this is not high school. This is your league.
No, this is high school.
Okay. So right? What's the best team? That's high school.
So I played on 2 teams in high school, right? So I played club soccer, was like outside of high school, and it's private, right? It's like out in the world. That team was doing really, really well, okay. Right? So like that team went undefeated and was playing really, really well. What happened the same year in high school, my high school soccer team, we got the worst record of school history, and I was the captain, and we got last place of league. The year prior, we had won league, right, and been extremely good. And so, and the team, I think if I remember correctly, we had won the league 10 years in a row.
Oh wow.
Okay, so then we lost. We got last place and the worst record in school history. So that was my junior year. that was a really bad experience. And I handled that really poorly. I basically was a complete fucking prick. And I shit on all my teammates. Because I was like,
weren't doing well.
I was like, you guys fucking suck. And that's how I talked to them. And because like there were plenty of players that didn't play well.
And Cole's on this team?
No, Cole had just graduated. And so like they basically weren't, a bunch of guys were not playing well. And like we as a team weren't playing well. But I didn't look at it like that. I looked at it as like, I have teammates that suck. And so that's not a captain, right? That's not like a good leader. And so I wasn't being a good leader. Now I was playing as hard as I could play, and I was doing everything that I personally, as an individual on the field, could do. But I wasn't a good teammate, wasn't a good team leader, and wasn't treating people well or with respect. I literally just was a complete fucking asshole, a complete dick. And I kind of could be, because I was, you know, top 2 or 3 person on the team. At least that's the way I thought. And so the next year came back and just, I had a completely different attitude, and so did the other guys. The other guys played much better, and like they realized that like my competitiveness wasn't because I didn't like them. It was because I wanted to win so bad. And so then we ended up winning league, and we went we had the best record in school history, and we went the deepest in the playoffs, and we lost in. Unfortunately, we lost in the finals of CIF, which is like the highest you can go. So we lost in the championship game.
Yeah. Well, that's a cool turnaround.
Yeah, it was a cool turnaround, and I'm still good friends with a lot of those guys, and we had so much fun. It was so cool.
We still haven't circled back to your relationship. You're 17.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. There's a whole lot there.
Like
It was a lot of fun.
Stupid.
What?
Said you like it was fucking stupid.
No, it was a lot of fun. I mean,
I was wondering when you were talking.
I don't know what's up. I don't know what's going on with Kelly Holcomb nowadays. I think she's married. I'm pretty sure she's married. She has a child. But I haven't talked to her in probably more than 10 years.
I was just wondering when you were saying your confidence, or whatever, when you were saying it got high when they opened that academy, but I was wondering, is that when you started dating this chick too?
Yeah, kind of all those things happened at the same time. So like I was dating her, I was playing soccer on a really successful team, and I was getting better grades.
That would help.
Yeah, so all 3 of those things were great. So, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Was like you kind of, at least for me, I go through these like waves of like having more confidence or whatever. Or just momentum, right? Like you get momentum and something, and it can snowball, right? And it keeps going, you know, and whatever you can hit a wall and a barrier. But yeah, there's been several times in my life where I've felt like a lot of momentum, and it's lasted quite a while. So yeah, my last couple of years of high school was like that. And then I would say I hit a wall, right? My first couple of years of college were very difficult for me.
I think that's probably for a lot of people though. If you're a senior, you're essentially the top, you know, you're the top.
Yeah.
You're the top dog. And then you go from being the bottom dog, and you get into college. You're a freshman again. Now you're the youngest.
Well, and you're in a whole nother environment.
Yeah.
And
you have no idea. Like you're on your own. You're depending on how far you went, your friends might not be around. You might not have a lot of friends around.
But it doesn't have to be that way, right? Some people have an amazing kind of first couple of years of college, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't. I decided not to play college soccer when I first went to school. I got recruited to go play at different colleges, but I didn't. They were all kind of lower level colleges from a soccer standpoint. I wasn't good enough to like go to play Division 1 or even be really recruited at Division 2. And so I got to this point where I was like, well, I'm not really getting recruited at any places I actually want to play at. I'm getting recruited at schools that have a really low level college soccer team. And I don't want to go to school there. And they just happen to be really expensive places to go to college. And so I'm like, really expensive. I don't want to go there, and I don't really want to play on the team. What's the point of getting a scholarship, right? So I had like 2 schools that were willing to give me pretty small dollar scholarships. So it wasn't like a big deal.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking like a few $1,000.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, it felt good. I guess it felt good to get kind of recruited there. But so I decided, hey, maybe my soccer career is over, right? And so I went to college. Went to Chico State University. Wildcats, baby. And Chico is a really fucking cool place. It's a place that's near and dear to my heart. It's just a really cool town. It's actually kind of like, it reminds me a lot of Bozeman.
Okay.
It's like up against the mountains in Northern California. There's rivers and lakes, and you're just out in nature. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
How far from Oregon?
It's like 5 hours from Oregon. So it's like an hour and a half northwest of Sacramento. Sorry, northeast of Sacramento. Or I guess really just north of Sacramento. And Sacramento's like dead center in the state of California. Pretty close to the center. So anyway, great. I loved, I knew I really wanted to go there.
And how far from home is this?
It's about 9 hours driving.
Okay. So your ways.
Yeah. It's like 550 miles, 600 miles. Maybe 8 hours. But it's in like a rural place, right? Like it's just farm fields around there, and then kind of the they call them buttes. There's like small mountains around there.
What do you know the population there?
It's about at the time it was about 90,000. I think it's probably like 110 now.
Okay. What's the elevation?
It's not that high. Maybe like I might take a guess. I don't really remember exactly. Maybe like 3,000 feet. Yeah, it's kind of like the mountains are here, and it's like it's just out in the flatlands of the mountains, and then the mountains are like really close by, the Sierra Nevada mountains.
How far from the coast are you?
Like 3.5 hours.
Okay, so you're in a ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But just like it feels like it's a really friendly place. People are super friendly. It's a lot slower lifestyle. That was a drastic change when I went to college, right? Going from LA to like this like smaller town. And so there were a gazillion things I liked about it, but I had a really tough freshman and part of sophomore year. So freshman year, like I'm in the dorms, I'm meeting all these new people. I didn't really click with anybody. And partly that was like I would say 50% of it was probably my fault. Was that like I didn't actually go out and try to be social for a couple of reasons. One is like Chico State has like a dropout rate of more than 50. Like I think it's like 60% of freshmen drop out. They drop out because it was a huge party school, and so people just party. And when I say party, I mean 7 days a week. And so I knew that I couldn't do that and actually stay in college. Right? Like I already was like had this experience of like not being that great of a student. Granted, my confidence was high from the last couple of years, but I'm now on my own, like, and I need to pass these classes, and so I didn't really go out and party a lot. I didn't really socialize as much as everybody else did. I was still socializing plenty, but the people that I was hanging around with like just weren't. I didn't click with, and they didn't seem to have like. At the time, they didn't really seem to have much going on for them. It was just like they were just partying and they were skipping class. And so I didn't really I didn't really get a good group of friends freshman year. That girlfriend I was telling you about broke up with me like right before the end of the school year. And so like we had continued dating into college. And that like fucking broke me.
Wait.
So I had a girlfriend junior and senior year of high school, and then we continued dating freshman year of college.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys date until?
Like I think about like almost 3 full years.
But I mean, how long while you were in college did you date her?
For like 8 or 9 months.
Okay. Would you guys would visit?
Yeah, so she'd fly up and spend a weekend, or I'd fly down and spend a weekend. She went to Long Beach State.
Okay.
So fucking funny to talk about now. But that like fucking broke me. Like when she broke up with me, I was just like fucking miserable. I was like, I can't believe I wasted my entire freshman year of college. Like, on the phone with her, or like trying to make that relationship work. So that was like a big shock. I was super upset. I was very upset about it for quite a long time. But then it opened up my whole world, right? Because, and I remember she broke up with me like kind of right before the school year ended. And I remember being like, what the fuck am I going to do? I don't want to go home for summer. I'm going to have to fucking see her. And that was like not a logical thought because I wasn't going to see her.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back sophomore year. And I remember
to school,
to college.
Yeah.
So and I remember having this conversation with my mom, and she's like, "You're gonna go back," And I'm like, "I don't fucking want to go back. Like, I'm not like I don't have any friends up there. I'm not whatever." And so like I wasn't really gonna drop out or anything. I just like had a moment, during this conversation with my mom. But sophomore year, I went back and the first semester sophomore year was a little rough, but it was better than my freshman year. And then, the world was just like starting to open up to me. At least that's the way I felt. And I had been contemplating like playing soccer again at a high level. And I was playing on a team up there, just like kind of recreationally. But again, like that didn't fit what I wanted to do. I wanted to play like at a high level. I didn't want to just like dick around and get drunk and play soccer. And so the coach who had previously been coaching there was kind of resigning. So now I was going to be a brand new coach. And so I knew, I was like, oh, that's probably a good time to join a team. Cause like he doesn't have any loyalty to the existing players. It's not like it's a whole new reset. And so second semester sophomore year, the school's in the midst of trying to hire a new coach. And for whatever reason, like the interview process went significantly longer than I think they all thought to find the right coach or whatever. And so normally you would start second semester and and like that's when spring training would start, but that didn't happen. And so I had been going over it and seeing a couple of times. I went over to the assistant coach and bugged him. I was like, hey, when's the new coach going to become? Like, when are you guys going to start having practices? Can you I want to try out. And he's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like don't fucking bother me, basically. Donnie Roboto. What up, Donnie? Donnie's a good friend of mine. Donnie's a fucking awesome guy. He's a really cool guy. But we didn't know each other at the time. And then the coach showed up, and on his very first day, I had been like tracking this, right? Like paying attention to this. And on his very first day, I went over to his office and knocked on his door and introduced myself. And I was like, hey, I want to try out. And he's like, hey man, this is my first day. Like I have all kinds of shit to do. Like I don't have time to talk to you. And he's like, come back in 2 hours. I come back in 2 hours. He's not there. And then like I catch him in the hallway or something. And he's like, yeah, come back in 2 hours. I come back in 2 hours and I'm like, hey man, I want to try out. And he's like, well, tell me who you are. Like give me your qualifications basically. And I just tell him who I am, who I played for. Like I played for this team. This is like our stats. Like this is, I gave him my like player resume, and he's like, "Oh, like you must be pretty good or whatever." Like I played with some really good guys
or whatever.
And so he goes, "Show up tomorrow. Practice is at 2 p.m. You got to go fill out all this paperwork, and you got to go get a physical from the on-site health clinic. And you have to show up to practice with the physical after you've done this physical." And he's like, "Practice at 2 p.m. Don't be fucking late." And he like said it like that. He's like, "Don't be fucking late." So he's giving me a chance. I'm fucking trying out tomorrow, right? And by the way, I haven't been training, right? I'm not in good shape. I'm not fucking ready to play. And I go, "Hey, I have class until 2 p.m. And he goes, "Don't be late." Is this what he just says to me? He's like threatening me, right? Basically, he's like, "Don't be late." I get out of class at 1:50 p.m. all the way across campus, right? And so there's no way I'm going to be there on time. So, and I have to go get a physical. I have no time to go get a physical. Anyway, I figure out how to go get a physical. I go get a physical during the day in between classes, pass the physical. And then I show up. He's not even there. The coach isn't even at practice. So we have like some like bullshit practice with just the players. Maybe Donnie was there. Donnie might have been running the practice. And then he shows up like way late. And his name was Felipe Restrepo. And so then I just kept playing with the team. And I tried out, and we had our first like kind of spring game, and I started and played really well. And so I played the whole spring, and that's when like everything all of a sudden clicked for me in college. It was all of a sudden I had 25 really good friends. There's like 25 guys on the team. And so all of a sudden you have like 25 buddies, right? You have 25 people you're going to see on campus. Like, you know, you're walking down the hallway or whatever, and you see them, "Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?" And so, that changed my life. It was like all of a sudden you just have a really good group of friends that you're into the same thing. You know, you're going through the same experiences. And so, long story short, I trained all summer long. I had a couple of my high school coaches actually like train me for free. They trained me like 3 days a week after work. I was working construction at the time. And so I'd go meet them at the park, and they would fucking beat the shit out of me.
And your degree is that you're pursuing is construction management, correct?
Not at the time.
What was it at the time?
I was a history major at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that actually is interesting. So second semester, sophomore year, I got the confidence to change my degree to construction management.
Okay.
And my confidence went through the roof when I started playing with that team. Part of the reason my confidence went so high was I just started feeling better about myself. But I was being surrounded by people who were doing something that I thought was really hard. So going to college, in my mind, I thought was really hard anyway, from an academic standpoint. And I was intimidated by that. But now you have to be a division, I would say to be a Division II college athlete in really any sport. You have to be a good student, because these sports don't make any money. Nobody watches Division II college sports on TV, right? There's no scholarship money. There's no advertising money. And so there's no money in it. And so they don't take people who are bad at school. You have to be good at your sport, and you have to be good in school. And so these guys were like I had guys, were getting straight A's, and they're playing college sports. Like, college sports is you spend 30 hours a week during the season playing sports. And then there's the travel time and whatnot. So think about that. That's like you have a full-time job basically for 30 hours, plus you travel to you fly across to other to play games, or you're taking a bus, and then you're going to school full time. So like for these guys to get straight A's and really good grades, I was like, man, like I want to be around these guys. These are people I want to be around. These guys are fucking smart and they're really good and they're fucking popular and there's a lot of girls that like them. And so it was like, this is the fucking group of people I want to hang out with. So I started to get a lot of confidence. I was like, I'm doing the right thing, right? I'm making the right moves. I have the right momentum. And so I then decided to change my degree to construction management, which was quite a big deal for really two reasons. One is construction management has a lot of engineering classes in it. It's like a third engineering, a third math. A third engineering, a third accounting, and then a third business. So it's like a third, a third, a third. And the engineering classes really intimidated me, like the difficult math and science classes. And so I got the confidence to switch majors. That was one kind of barrier, was like all the hard classes. The other one was construction management was such a high unit degree. What that means is to graduate, you have to take a lot more classes to actually acquire the degree. And basically all the classes I had taken for the first 2 years were worthless. Literally almost every class I took for 2 years did not count towards my degree.
Well, that's gay.
Yeah. So I had to basically start over. So deciding to do that was hard because I was like, fuck, dude, I'm basically wasting the first 2 years. I'm starting over. But I decided to do it. Yeah. And then that summer I worked out really hard, got in really good shape, and came back and I made the team.
Nice. So how many more years did you add to school with this degree change?
Technically I only added one. But I failed a class, and so I added 1.5.
I got you.
Which meant I had to take more classes, right? So like I took a lot more units than the average student, especially the average athlete. So I took like 19 units a semester. Most people take like 14 or 15 or 16. So I took 1 to 2 classes more every semester in order to somewhat graduate on time.
If you don't mind me asking, did your folks pay for your school or did you?
My parents paid for my school.
Nice.
My parents paid for my school up until my last year.
Dude, I mean, the fact that like where you were saying they started with like paying for the houses and everything to be able to pay for their kids' school is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that comes from my mom and dad, probably specifically my dad, probably more so, or maybe that's an incorrect assumption on my part, but my dad's father, my grandfather, really didn't give my dad any money ever since he was 18. He did give my dad a loan to buy his first house. Obviously he had to pay him back, but and so my dad just didn't want to have that kind of relationship with his kids. I think he wanted to be like, hey, no, like I'll help you, with some of this stuff that he wished maybe his dad would help him. That's just kind of an assumption that I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, my parents paid for all of our school.
I think.
I mean, I had to pay for like my own like fun and shit like that. Like I worked, so I worked all summer, and then I worked when I wasn't playing soccer.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know, because I don't have kids, but like the concern is, or the thought is, that if kids have everything paid for, they become very spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously work very hard, and your brother, so whatever the balance was, it seems like your folks got it right because they helped you out where you needed it and it could benefit you. But all three of you, from what I can tell, and it seems pretty obvious, have very hard work ethic. So it's not.
Yeah. Um,
And you've used the opportunity that you've been given from them to very much benefit yourself. You haven't just, it's not a waste. You didn't just go there and fuck off and party and then not. You've, and yeah, maybe you did, but you are a high level construction manager now. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like to say I did both, right? Like I worked my ass off. But I partied my ass off too,
sure.
right? Like, yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I always worked really hard, especially when my back was against the wall. I guess because I had to. Like I remember, one year I was dating this girl, and I was taking a physics class, and this is the class I had taken. I technically took the class like 4 times. Um, I dropped out the first 2 times because I was failing, so I dropped before like the drop, before you could, I guess, the drop deadline. And this was like a failure, not because I wasn't trying. Like I was fucking trying hard and I was failing. Um, but I remember, I would get up, um, on Friday mornings after partying all night on Thursday nights, because Thursday nights were like a thing to go out. You went out on
Their
Thursday
thing
night,
here.
huh?
Their thing for MSU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, so I would get up at like 4:45 in the morning and I would do my physics homework. I'd do my physics homework right before class. And class was at 8 a.m. So let's just say I started my physics homework at like 5:15 or something. So it'd take me like 2.5 hours to do my physics homework. And then I'll go straight to physics class. And I figured that out through like, that like if my mind was sharp when I went into the class, right, of like the material, then I would learn more in class. But I guess I tell that story because like what other college kids getting up on at 4:45, and going to class or doing their homework that early. I just did it because like for whatever reason it worked for me. Probably because I was too lazy to do something on Thursday afternoon when everybody was starting to go party. I didn't want to miss out. That's probably really why it was.
You started this, dude. I gotta piss. So I'm gonna piss, but you started this with you were dating this girl, so you didn't explain how to do that.
Yeah.
You can tell me in a second.
Okay. I'm gonna go right after you. I'm gonna go again.
Back.
We're back.
So what happened to this girl you were dating?
Nothing. It was just I would I would go out and party with her on Thursday nights, her and her friends, and that was always a lot of fun. And then I just get up really early Friday morning and go to, physics class. And so I just remember like literally like leaving her house, and then coming home to do my physics homework, which is like ridiculous.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, so then what? Oh man, I'm trying so hard to stop saying. Okay, so
Yeah. Take your time.
I don't know how to start a That's your sophomore year, junior, senior year. How's it go? What was your construction job you were working then?
Yeah, so what I would do, every summer since I was 16 or so, I worked in construction, had a couple different jobs. I mean, basically all 4 years of high school, I worked at a heating and air conditioning company in the summer. And in Southern California, it's basically an air conditioning company, right? You don't really use heating in SoCal, very much. But so I worked at a heating and air conditioning company. One of my buddy's dads owned a company, and so I would work for him in the summers. Freaking awesome job, great, like way to learn how to do things and just how to work hard, work really, really hard, working in people's attics and in their basement. And I remember one summer, the hottest attic that we were in that summer was 146 degrees. And I was in there for 8 hours. So I had to come out like every 30 minutes and get drinks of water and cool off. But we had a thermometer up there. That's how I knew it was 146, because we were like, this is crazy. How hot is this attic? And but that's basically all summer long. Like it's 100 and 130. And really any normal attic, and it's like 130 degrees when it's 95 or 100 out. So I learned how to work hard there. I wouldn't say I learned how to work smart necessarily all the time there, but I learned how to work hard. So I'd come home and like I was beat, like I was dirty, been in somebody's attic. I'm just installing ductwork or sheet metal or crawling around in people's basements too.
Did you spend any summers at Chico, or did you come?
I spent one summer in Chico. Yeah.
What year was that?
It was in between my junior and senior year.
Okay.
But remember, I had a super senior year.
So it was in between your junior and senior.
Yeah.
But not in between your senior and super senior.
Right.
Gotcha.
That year I took a summer school class. I took accounting, and then I worked at an auto body shop, and I made some money on the side coaching soccer.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I did some internships for some like large general contractors, in the summers too. So like probably what was maybe like the size of Compass was like, one of the companies I worked for was probably like that size, and they
we would have interns there a lot in the summertime.
And so I worked for I worked for them for like 2 summers. I worked for a different company for like another summer.
You're like the project engineer's bitch.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually really cool. I had 2 really cool experiences. I was like the superintendent's bitch.
I mean, I'd say bitch, and I'm just joking because that has to be one of the best learning experiences you're going to get when you're in.
I learned so much; it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I learned so much. It was, by the time I got out of college, I had a huge advantage of people because I had worked so much in the construction industry, whether it's hands-on or like in management. But I also was older, right? So imagine, I'm already a year older than everybody in my grade. But then it took me another year and a half to get out of college on top of that. So I got out of college at 24. Right. And so for me, there was a big difference in my maturity from 24 to like 21 or 22. And most people get out of college at 21 or 22, and they lack a lot of maturity. And so when I got out of college, I felt like I had a huge level up on who was kind of my peers, right? And my peers were actually, my competition, right? Because if we both get out of college at the same time, we both start working at the same time, we're peers of each other, and you're kind of in competition for them for like the next promotion, right? And so at that point I'd been in construction for like 10 years by the time I got a job. Right? 4 in high school and 5.5 in college. I've fucking worked for 9.5 years in construction, which it's all part-time, right? So like it's not really 9.5 years, but
So he got much more of an idea of what goes on and how things
go.
So then when you started as a project engineer?
Yep. Yeah, I had a different title. They called them office engineers at Clark.
Oh, okay.
And
why?
Then
Why did they do that?
Because they wanted to create another system. They wanted to create another level. So there was an office engineer right out of college, and to get promoted, you could be a project engineer. where other companies just bring you in as a project engineer and that's your title. It's just a title. Then you get paid the same amount.
Did you ever work around LA or no?
I did, yeah. So I was in San Diego for about 2 years after college, and then Clark didn't have any more jobs in San Diego. There was like a lull, a gap when we didn't have any work down there. And then, so I went up to the LA area and I worked at the University of Riverside, which is a couple hours. It's funny that I say this. It's a couple hours outside of LA, but it's still considered the Los Angeles area.
I was thinking that because one of the superintendents I worked under I know he worked in LA for a while, and I just wondered if you worked for Clark.
I don't know. What's his name?
Scott.
Scott what?
Donder.
Don't know him.
Yeah. I mean,
but Clark's a big company, so I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I did one project like that would be considered like in the LA area.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, continue. So you after school you went. That was your first job was with Clark in San Diego.
Yep. So yeah, I got out of school, went to Clark, and they gave me 3 offers. They said you can be in LA, San Francisco, or San Diego, and I said San Diego.
It seemed like the best choice.
Yeah, and I had a lot of friends that were going to the San Francisco area. I just felt like San Diego would be better.
Yeah, I don't know much, but I've heard it's fun.
It's very, San Francisco is more of like a city, right? San Diego's like a city on the beach. San Francisco was probably more sexy from like a tech standpoint and like, but like I was interested in hanging out on the beach, so I went to San Diego.
That's why I was exactly what I was thinking with those 3 choices.
When I first moved there, man, I went to the boardwalk and I checked out the scenery and I was like, I made the right choice.
I bet.
Yeah. But before I went to work for Clark, one of the really cool things Clark allowed me to do, but I was kind of already planning to do, and I told Clark this from when I interviewed them, was that like, I'm going to take 4 months off. So I wasn't going to just get out of school and like, take a couple weeks off and then go straight to work. I took 4 months off and I went to South America.
Nice.
And so, I spent 6 weeks in Peru. It wasn't quite 4 months. A little bit less than that, but I spent 6 weeks in Peru, about 2 weeks in Ecuador, and another like 5 weeks in Colombia.
What was that like?
It was fucking sick. It was so cool. Yeah, it was like a time of my life.
What'd you do?
Yeah, so I was backpacking, right? But they consider backpacking. You literally have a backpack, right? And that's everything that you have is with you. And so, yeah, I toured around Peru, right? So there's a lot of ancient kind of civilization stuff in Peru with the Incas. And so I went, I did what they call the Machu Picchu trek. And so it's like a 7 or 8 day trek. And so you hike along the Machu Picchu trail. The Inca trail. And then you hike to Machu Picchu. And so these tours, they're like part historical, but part like extreme sports. And so like one day we did like zip lining across this like huge canyon. Like, there's like huge, like if you fell, like you'd fall hundreds of feet. So it was like zip lining, and then you would hike more. And then the next day would be like hiking, and then they would do whitewater rafting. And then you'd hike more, and then every time you're like spending the night like out in the jungle. Like we'd spend the night like in these huts. Like as you hike 10 miles and then they feed you and you go to sleep and you sleep in these huts and you keep hiking another 10 or 15 miles. And then there's these really cool activities in between. So like another day we did like extreme mountain bike riding. And they're all people that are young, right? Everybody's like 22 to 30 years old, and you're meeting people from all over the world. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the big things I did in Peru was Machu Picchu and that whole experience. And then I just like toured around Peru. Man, there's some really cool cities. It's kind of like, yeah, you're like wandering the earth, you know, and you hear about a cool place to go and you go. Like, it's really that simple. And then you get to the next place and you hear about another really cool place and you're like, you go to that place. And so the way it kind of works, it's called the Gringo Trail. There's like a trail. The Gringo Trail starts in Mexico and it goes to South America all the way down to like either Chile or Argentina. Or you can do the reverse, right? And you can start at the bottom and work your way up, or do it anywhere in between. But you meet people from all over the world, and
I thought there was a lot of that you couldn't get through.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of those countries that are extremely, you know, they're kind of like Montana, right? Like, it's just like there's no roads, or it's just like natural, right? So there's a lot of those countries that are huge countries that there's like not much built, right? But in Panama, they have what they call the Darien Gap. So the Darien Gap is a non-trespassable by car.
I think this is what I was thinking of. You were the one telling me about this, yeah.
Yeah, so the Darien Gap is in Panama, between Panama and Colombia. And the Darien Gap is not passable by car. There's no road. You can't even get a 4-wheel drive through it. Like, people have done it on dirt bikes before. But even people like literally struggle like to do on a dirt bike. So you can imagine how like treacherous it is.
Yeah. So you didn't go through this, or no?
No, what I did was on the way back. So on the way up, you know, when I got to Colombia, I finished my trip in Cartagena, Colombia. And Cartagena itself is an amazing city, an amazing place, and lots of world history. I say world history just because so many things from around the world kind of concentrated in Cartagena, Colombia. But I took a sailboat, so I sailed across the Caribbean.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, that was fucking cool. It was like 25 people. So it took 5 days, which is, it's fucking crazy. It's crazy being on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean and you can't see land, and you can't see land for days. The first couple of days, you're a little tweaked because you're like, you know, you get a little freaked out, but it was cool.
Did you contemplate just never not going to work for Clark? Just living out of your backpack for the next?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely you're having the time of your life, right? Because I mean, I didn't have any worries, and you're just literally living in the moment, at least that I was at the time, at that age. And part of it, I think, maybe is because there was a defined time, right? Like, I was living in the moment. I knew that I had a job to go back to. So that was very liberating, right? Because I literally spent all my money, all of it, and then put some on a credit card because I knew that I could pay for it like in a month, right? Mm-hmm. And so the way I got home was like, I called my mom and I was like, hey, I can either take this sailing trip or get on a flight, but either way I don't have enough money to get home. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, it's going to cost me like $600 to either fly home, or it's going to cost me basically $600 to take this sailing trip and then fly home, because it was cheaper to fly out of Panama. And I wanted to do the sailing trip. So I was like, my mom's like, whatever, man. Like, I'll put $600 in your account, whatever. And so then my first paycheck I got from Clark, I just paid my parents back.
And you had to time that because you got to work for 2 weeks before you get a paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was dead broke. I remember having like $25. I mean, I remember having $25 for a lot of time in college, but I lived like $25 to $25 for like a while in one summer, but I remember my first 2 weeks in San Diego, I had like $25 in my account.
That's what I remember Scott was telling me, and that's why you're making me think of it when he was started work. Like same situation, the way that most people start with a big company like that. I think he said 3/4 of his like monthly paycheck would go to his rent,
Yeah,
and then he just had no fucking money.
100. Like that was like that the
He
first
said it
couple
was
of
just
years.
fuck. That's exactly how he explained it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was just any. Okay, so let's transition into my time in San Diego. The first couple of years was debauchery. I was working like a dog, but when I wasn't working, I was partying. I lived with a buddy that I went to college with, Brock. Shout out to Brock Bush. He lives in Panama now. But Brock and I lived together, and we had a blast, man. We lived together for a while, and we would just party. Yeah, I didn't have any money. Yeah, it was expensive, right? Like more than 3/4 of my money went to rent after taxes. But yeah, whatever. I mean,
so when did you
yeah.
turn that corner?
Wait, making more money?
Making more money, not partying every week.
I mean,
Because you're what, 25, 26 now?
yeah, I don't know. I don't think I still haven't turned the corner.
Well, shit, you're on like day whatever of not drinking at all.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, that group of people that I hung out with, we partied pretty hard when we weren't working. We had a lot of fun. I wouldn't say we partied an unhealthy amount. There were definitely times when we shouldn't have drank so much, but pretty healthy group. We just were having fun, man. We were young. First time we had any money in our pockets. And when I say that, like we were broke, but like we thought that, when you go from having, literally, $25 in your bank account or $100 in your bank account to having 2,000, you think it's a big deal, right? It's not.
It is a big deal, though.
Yeah, but like it's like now I'm thinking, well, $2,000 isn't a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
But like when you're like, dude, I got $2,000. You used to have 100, so you're like, I'm fine.
I'm good, bro.
Yeah, that's how you think. And so I was like, I'm fucking balling, dude. I got $2,000 in my bank account. Fuck, dude. I'm ready to go. Drinks on me, right? I wouldn't change it for the world, man. We had a blast. I mean, so this is what I'll paint you the picture. This is what we would do every week, basically. And it's all the people that I hung out with, like, were about my age, plus or minus 3 or 4 years, right? And so the guys and girls that worked at Clark, or that like we would all be ultimately meet people and be friends with, is Thursday nights we would go out, just like college. And we'd go out pretty hard Thursday nights, but not that hard because we all had to be at work. I had to be at the job at like 7:00 in the morning the next morning. But I was always hungover. So Fridays I was hungover most times. Work until like 3:00 on a Friday, 3:30. As soon as I get off, we're going straight. I went straight to the beach, and I lived at the beach, right? Like I lived like 2 blocks from the beach, and so, whenever I wasn't at work, I was swimming in the ocean, walking on the boardwalk, riding my bike on the boardwalk, listening to music, going to bars. But like Friday night party hard, right? Out till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Wake up, 9, 10 a.m. Go hit a taco spot or breakfast joint. Eat some breakfast. Right after that, now it's like noon, 1:00. Crack some beers, party on the boardwalk, go up and down the beach, and then Saturday night rage. Sunday, keep going, go to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, then take a nap, and then, whatever, hang out for a few hours and go to sleep. Do it all over again. That went on for years.
That just stressed me out.
Yeah. It was fun.
So how many years did you work at Clark?
Well, so the way I described it was the first probably 2 years at Clark.
Okay.
Things changed. But I worked there for almost 7 years.
So essentially from like 24 to 31.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And you're at some point you become a project manager.
I never actually made it to project manager. I switched routes and I went back into the field. So I decided to go the field route and become a superintendent instead of a project manager and go the project management route. And so I kind of made that decision kind of at the same time. That I was probably.
I thought you were a PM and not a superintendent.
I mean, here's the thing: is like, if we can talk about like the technicalities of like people's roles and their titles and stuff.
Let's not bore anyone or ourselves.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is that I was basically a senior project manager in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but like I was performing at a super high level for a few years, even though my title wasn't that. What I realized was that my skill set was much better suited and my opportunity for success was much better suited in the field. And so I made a decision to go into the field and become assistant superintendent. So that's what I did.
So when you left Clark, you were a superintendent or assistant?
I was assistant superintendent.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably like the most fun job for a big company.
Everybody says that their most fun job, or at least people said at the time that the best role on the entire job is the assistant superintendent's job.
That's what all the superintendents told me, and that's essentially what I was doing when I left Compass, because you're in field, but you're getting to you're
do the
also
work.
getting to kind of see how everything's being done. It's a nice mix.
Yeah, when I was assistant superintendent, it was a lot of fun.
That was right when I quit.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It was a lot of fun. I did like it. I learned a lot. I liked the job. I didn't like a bunch of the other bullshit around the job. If I could just build buildings and do my job, I would have loved it. But that's not what it was like. That there was all kinds of other things that came with it that I really disliked about.
You were working for a large corporation, so.
Yeah, the largest privately held construction company in the country.
How large are they?
I don't know how many employees they have now. I would say about probably 5,000 right now.
Okay.
But they're the largest privately held construction company in the country. They happen to also be one of the largest construction companies in the country. So they just happen to kind of meet both criteria. And when I say largest, the way they rate construction companies is dollar value annually, right? So what's the size of what's the size of your contract values? And so Clark's kind of been in the top 10, whether they're 3 or 1 or 9, whatever, call it, around the top 10 largest general contractors for 25 years.
What's their span? How
they work everywhere.
Because I haven't seen them here.
They're not in Bozeman, right? So they work all over across the country. They primarily work in large markets.
Are they outside the U.S. or no?
They've done some things outside the U.S., but primarily they're a U.S. company. They primarily work in large markets, and the reason for that is Clark, just like a lot of GCs, but Clark is really, they're a construction company, but they're not just a construction company. So they they take the money. They're like a financial company. So if you think about it, if at any point in time Clark has I don't know, $7 billion worth of construction, right? That they're working on. Okay. And so, if you have $7 billion, right, that you get paid annually, right? You divide that up
Is that a total? Is that a random number?
No, that's like what they get paid like every year. I shouldn't say it's what they get paid. It's what they like the volume of work they do. And so if you take 7 billion and divide it by 12, right? Whatever that number is, that's how much money you have in a bank account. And so, let's say I'm Clark and you're a subcontractor of mine, and I have a gazillion of them on all these projects, right? Let's just use one project as an example. I get paid from the owner, right? And I have $10 million, and I have to pay 9.5 of that to my subcontractors. So I take 10 million. I owe 9.5 of it. Okay. And I'm going to dish that out, but it's going to sit in this bank account for 30 days. Okay. Well, in that 30 days, that money is gaining interest, right? So I'm making 7% on $9.5 million, right, in interest for the time that it's sitting in this account. And so I'm making money on somebody else's money. It's not my money; it's the owner's money. The owner gave me the money. It's going to sit here for 30 days, and then I'm going to give it to you. Well, if you think about that on a larger scale, right? And they're using somebody else's money to sit in a bank account for a given period of time. I'm just using 30.
Yep.
And they're making interest on it. And so, Clark makes interest on somebody else's money, and they make money on the project.
Yeah.
I don't know how you got to. What was the question you asked me?
What was the question I asked you?
I don't remember.
I think I was just asking kind of the where they do work and how big a project, and you were saying they do these large projects.
Yeah, so I was saying how they come up with the dollar value of how they rate these GCs. It's the annual revenue, how much money, how much their projects are worth cumulative. Yeah, so I mean, I in hindsight, like Clark was one of the best places to ever go. I learned a lot. They know exactly what the fuck they're doing. They are, they're the best of the best, if you will. Whether there's a bunch of competitors that are around that they're kind of similar, right? That are also would be spectacular places to go work as well, that you would learn a lot. So I learned a ton. And I really learned how to push myself really, really hard. Clark does an amazing job at onboarding people. They do an amazing job at brainwashing people. I mean, seriously, they're experts at it. They brainwash their employees really, really well. And it's not all brainwashing, right? Like some of it is, some of it isn't. It depends on individual circumstances, but they do a great job of kind of creating a company culture, and you feel like you're ingrained in the culture, which is what you would want, right? If you're going to create a kind of an entity like that.
And like, I'm sure if you're being honest too, there's a lot of like opportunity for the employees there too, should they follow this path.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity. Yeah, I think it's both, right? Like there's bad sides to that brainwashing, and there's great sides to it as well.
It kind of depends on what you want out of life.
Yeah.
And your job.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, I think. But at the same time, you're in a system, right? And so there were times when I felt disenfranchised, and I didn't, I was very discouraged about what was going on. I didn't agree with kind of what was happening with some of the management decisions. I was extremely underpaid. A lot, everybody was really underpaid, in my opinion. But at the same time, hey, like they're running their business, right? Like, like obviously it works for them. They've been around a long time. Like if they underpay people and they can still be in business and be good at it, whatever. That's what they want to do. But for me, I needed more money to get a cushion to live a healthier lifestyle. And Clark wasn't offering that to me. I gave him plenty of chances to kind of pay me a little more, and I met with my bosses and my boss's bosses, and let them know that I had higher aspirations for myself. After really trying to give them an opportunity to keep me, I found another opportunity, kind of landed in my lap, and I left. But it wasn't without like really giving it my best effort to try to stay. I really liked the people there for the most part. I really got along with them. I had some great mentors. Some people taught me a lot. So yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask you that. So you're here in Bozeman now. What stemmed that idea and urge to leave that kind of, career that you'd been in for a while and essentially changed your life in a lot of ways and moved to a part of the country where I don't know, maybe you knew a few people here. Did you really know anyone here? And I guess just what got that idea going and why or how'd you end up here?
Yeah.
What was going through your mind then?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that were going through my mind then. In general, I would say that like I knew that I was living a lifestyle that I didn't think was very healthy, and I didn't think it was sustainable. So I don't think it was lasting. And so I was, there was a time when I was working on several projects so much, it was really unsustainable to really have anything outside of work. I was telling somebody this the other day who had asked me about it because he had had a similar experience, or what he thought was a similar experience. So then we kind of shared notes, or experiences rather. But there was one project that I lived like a mile from the job, and I would get there at like 5 a.m, and then I would leave at like 5 p.m. I would come back at like 8 o'clock at night, and I would do RFIs and submittals until like 1 or 2 a.m.
And you're on salary.
When I'm on salary. And so the reason for that was, and this is back in 2013. So I personally managed $40 million in trades. So now that would be over $160 million that one person is handling. So what does that mean? So like the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire sprinkler, fire alarm, concrete, rebar, steel, all of that, and all the underground utilities, all that I was managing as one person. So normally, what's he doing? I wonder what that is. So normally they would have divided that up into three people. So anyway, like that's obviously clearly not sustainable, right? And like that went on for like a year, right? I'm not saying I did it every single day, but there were definitely times when like I was working that much.
And I could see if you were on an hourly wage.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing it, you're putting away
Well,
a fuckload of extra money.
So the reason I did it was because I viewed that if I don't get these things done, it's my response. Like the project's going to be a failure, and it's my responsibility. So what do I mean by that is, okay, so let's say you're going to order an air handler, right? Well, the air handler takes 6 months to get, right? So if it's going to be installed on this date, it's 7 months away, right? I have a month right now between now and ordering it. Well, a submittal is you put together a package, right? And says, hey, we're going to order this particular air handler. And you send that package into your engineering team. They review it and they say, yeah, but this needs to change, that needs to change, this needs to change. But yep, other than that, it's all good. So revise and resubmit. So then you change your paperwork, you resubmit your paperwork, and then they approve it. And so they approve the paperwork, then you can release and order the material, right? And so for me, I knew the schedule, right? And so I knew when I had to order this shit. And everything was stacking up. And so the only way that I could get it all done was I'd have to go back at night and do all this paperwork at night, because during the day I was like getting bombarded with questions and subcontractors coming in and needing other problems like day-to-day fixed. So I kind of felt the weight of all that on my shoulders. So anyway, that lifestyle, although it taught me a lot and it really showed me kind of what I could do if I really worked that hard, it wasn't conducive to having a healthy lifestyle. And so I would say 95% of the people that I was surrounded by were very unhealthy people. They're unhealthy in whether the relationship with their wife or their kids, right? And their relationship with their wife, was basically maybe either non-existent or not healthy or, whatever. And same thing with their kids. And then let's say that was the case. Well, then somebody didn't have a healthy relationship with themselves. Overweight, way out of shape, unhappy, And so those things, they brew, right? And they come, you can't avoid those things. They will show up in your life one way or another, right? Like you can run from them temporarily, right? But those things will not go away from you if you don't handle them. And so I was noticing that, like, I don't want to be like any of these people. Like I started to go from, hey, these people were my mentors 3, 4, 5 years ago, to like, I don't want to be them and I don't want to be around them. There are parts and pieces of those people that are spectacular. There are parts and pieces of those people that are very admirable. But as a whole, I didn't really see any people that were balanced. Those were few and far between. So I was looking for a way out of a situation that I felt trapped in. I started to pay attention to like my intuition. And so when I was taking vacations, I would always take the vacations to like the mountains. I go camping trips. And I'd go camp next to a river or a lake or whatever. Places where there aren't a lot of people. And it would be really quiet and peaceful. And so I started paying attention. I'm like, man, year after year after year, like whenever I take a break, it's always to the mountains. I grew up with an uncle who lived in Central Oregon, Bend, Oregon. And so Bend is like very similar to Bozeman in its characteristics. And so I'd seen somebody who had lived a lifestyle that's not in a big city. And my uncle has always had a really healthy lifestyle. And so I had this hunch that like people in small mountain towns that have a lot of recreation around them, that they just have a healthier lifestyle, right? In general, like they seem healthier, they seem more connected to their community. And so that was a hunch that I had.
Do you think you've picked up a little bit of this from your college experience too?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
100%. And so, yeah, I felt disenfranchised. I thought I was way underpaid, way underappreciated. And I didn't have an example, of like, oh, this works, right? Like I didn't have a lot of examples of like, oh, like I want to be like that person. And so that was kind of pushing me away from like a big company like Clark. Because these big companies tend to do business only in big cities. Yeah, so I had a desire to like make that shift and make that change.
I almost hate to say it, but I thought the exact same thing when I left that job that I was in. I was working under two senior superintendents, very successful, both of them with the company for a long time. And they literally told me, "We're grooming you. You're going to be the next us." They're both divorced. One was really unhealthy. The other guy was fairly healthy, but like pretty unhappy. Divorced, and like divorced is kind of generalizing
because like 50% of people are divorced.
There's times you should be divorced, so it's a not like, but it just their overall kind of approach to life or consensus of life and how they approach their job, and then their work-life balance. And I thought about that, and I'd look around, and then I'd look at everyone in the industry and think, no offense, but there's not one fucking person I hope I'm like here when I'm 20 years older.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, so for me, I've learned to appreciate all the things kind of within that. What do I mean by that is there are skills and abilities that people have that are very admirable, right? And like I would like to learn how to do that thing, right? And I would like to learn how that person can teach me that, right? But that person could be really lopsided, right? And they're really, really good at a handful of things, but they're so weak at other things. And so I couldn't have pinpointed that. I couldn't have articulated that, but like for some reason I could just feel it. And so I wanted to kind of round myself out and have some more, not be so lopsided. I was extremely lopsided myself. I was fucking rock star at certain things. I was fucking unstoppable, right? But then there's like so many other things in my life that like I wasn't even close, right? I had fucking no clue, right? And I had kind of had a wake up call. I had a rough breakup a couple of years after college, and had quite a wake up call there, that made me kind of change my perspective. And so I started to then, I felt like I could see, that like I needed to round myself out.
I was thinking of asking you this at some point, so maybe this is the time. Is that something that like was a big pivotal moment for you in your life?
What's that?
That breakup?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's anything like in your life specifically that happened that like, wow, my life totally went this way because of this or that. You were on a path and then something totally changed the trajectory.
Yeah, I don't know if like I would have figured some of these things out anyway, right? So the timing could have just been a coincidence. But it was I guess it was good timing because I was kind of you know, it was getting to a point where it was like pretty unhealthy. Like my lifestyle was pretty unhealthy. I was just working way too much, and it wasn't reciprocal, right? So it wasn't. I was working really hard, and it was a one-way street. I wasn't getting the work. The benefit from the work wasn't really coming back to me. And I think that's an important thing. Is that like, you know, there's one it's one thing to be like work really really hard and just keep your head down and just keep working, but you do have to pay attention to like, is this actually working? Like there's a feedback loop, right? And it's like if it's not looping back and it's not connecting, you got to ask yourself like, okay, like where is the feedback coming? And it was almost like it was going out into the abyss, right? And so I started to just pay attention, like these other things are falling apart, and it's a direct result of my, like me being fucking lopsided. It's like I don't have these skills. I don't have like I need to change my perspective, or I need to change my mindset on certain things. And so I did, and I became a way happier person. I mean, from the 4th or 5th year working at Clark to the 5th or 6th year working at Clark is just like night and day. Like I made a huge turnaround, and it became way, way, way healthier my last couple of years at Clark than it had the previous years.
And there had to be something, you correct me if I'm wrong, but something to do with your age and your maturing, sort of.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this a handful of times, like when your frontal lobe fully develops. And
yeah. So when I turned like 27 is when I started.
And it's usually 25, but you're 2 years behind on everything.
Fucking dude, it just takes me longer.
It's roughly around 25.
Yeah, so that makes sense. 27, 28 is when I started to make changes. Which is like right on. Like I'm actually right on schedule. Everybody else is just a little faster. Right on schedule for me. But yeah, so I mean, all the people that were my mentors at Clark, I have so much. I'm so thankful for them. But I think what I've learned now is that, like, you know, I'm just more open to that. Like, it's okay that people are lopsided, right? Just take the good things from them, and don't beat them up, or even in your mind, like don't discount them because they are lopsided, right? Because at the end of the day, if you just look at that as like a mirror, and like I'm lopsided today. I'm less lopsided than I was, but there's things that I'm unaware of, and I don't have the skills. I don't, and so like, I hope to learn those things. And I hope to become aware of them in the future. But so those people, they're great people. They just have flaws, just like we all do. And so, I didn't used to share that perspective. I used to think like more black and white, and I was like, oh, that person's all fucked up. Well, they're not all fucked up. They are fucked up, but they have some freaking awesome attributes that you can learn from.
Yeah, I would put it as we're all fucked up.
Yeah.
And we also all have some really strong attributes.
Yeah.
And some really strong downfalls.
Yeah.
And that's.
And had I been in their situation, like I might have made the exact same decisions, right? Like, and I'm talking about like, you know, some of these decisions of these like higher up people that were my mentors that took really good care of me in many ways. Like, they're driven by their ego, but like, who says that I wouldn't be susceptible if I'm like the senior vice president of this division? Like, my ego would have driven me too. I'm the fucking man, right? And then you act like you're the fucking man when you're really, yeah, you might be the man, but you're still just a man, and like you still have a bunch of flaws to work on. And so they're humans, and humans make mistakes. So, yeah, I mean, freaking awesome people. Some of them are awesome, and some of them I don't care to speak with.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm saying okay, so again.
Yeah.
So you got to Bozeman. What was that? I mean, you can either say what it was like transitioning to getting here or just getting here and how that's changed since.
Yeah, so I moved in January 2019. It's been a really good transition. I think the first few years were really exciting and fun, and it was different and new, and so it was like fucking awesome. I think maybe the 2 years after that were a little tough. So because kind of the newness had worn off and the excitement.
It sounds like a relationship.
Yeah, right. It does. It sounds like a relationship. It is a relationship.
Sounds like every intimate relationship.
It's a relationship with a place, right?
Honeymoon's over.
But overall, it's been a good experience for me, right? It's kind of forced me to look at those other sides of myself. The winters are long here, right? And I always have my winters since I've lived here have been really kind of self-reflective.
This is interesting.
Yeah, so like in the winters, I would say I self-reflect a lot because I'm forced to. Because if it's cold for a long time, there's fucking snow on the ground, and there's times when like I may have already gone outside and been outside a bunch, and so like it's like, okay, like I don't want to go back outside. Right? It's freezing cold, and I don't want to put all the gear back on or whatever. And so I spend more time indoors than I do, obviously, in the spring or in the summer or in the fall. So I've grown a lot. I think in the last 5 years, I've changed a lot. My perspective is very different. I've had a very different work experience, kind of from the beginning of when I was in Bozeman to even the middle and even to now. And so I would say I've changed as a person. If that just coincides with being in Bozeman. But I would stand by this statement is that people in small towns that are surrounded by a lot of recreation have in my personal opinion, a much higher degree of happiness, and they're happier and healthier than people in large cities. Or I would even say even in small cities that don't have a lot of recreation. Like, so I think Bozeman fits that. I think it's a super healthy community we live in. In general, does it have its flaws? Yes.
Yeah.
But in general, it's a very healthy place. People are friendly and nice and generally happy. I met some great people. I've met some spectacular people around here.
You know what I just thought of, which this is probably stupid, but I'm gonna say it. What you were just saying, the approach you had to people of like, say people at Clark or people you've worked with, they can have their really strong side, and it doesn't make them terrible.
Yeah.
I just thought of that in the sense of a city. So you could look at any city and say there's so much you could take away from that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to take, like, it doesn't have to define the whole thing. But you can take from that what you want, and then.
Yeah, I mean, the city has flaws, and the city as a whole has flaws that it could work on, right? Like we've talked about work ethic, right? And the people in the big cities have a way better work ethic. There's no doubt. Now, that's a good quality to have a really good work ethic. What's not a good quality is to overwork. And then, because then you get lopsided, and you don't have the things that Bozeman has, right? Could Bozeman have a like in general, from a business standpoint and employees standpoint, could Bozeman have a better work ethic? It could, but I don't want it to have a really, really good work ethic, because then it's not going to be that fun of a place to live.
Yeah.
Right. Like if it becomes like fucking LA or New York and everybody's trying to shit on everybody's trying to compete to a level that's like unhealthy, fuck that. Like I'm not trying to live in a environment like that.
You know what's interesting is you can see how that could happen though, indirectly, because it becomes so expensive. So
Yeah.
who's going to want to work that hard and pay that much money to live here? People with really hard work ethic. And then this has gone on forever, but it's like then a lot of people from cities are going to come here because they'll outwork everyone else. And then in a sense, like, hate it or love it, and there's like, this is a very broad statement, but you're then going to want to turn that more into the city you're used to. It's going to have the things that the city you were used to has, and so you could see how that kind of happens.
Yeah,
and it's
I can.
fucking expensive to live here now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So what are your current day aspirations for your life now? What are you working on right now?
Well, so we're working on this podcast.
Shout out to this podcast.
Yeah, shout out to the Kyle and Tim podcast. You can follow us on all the social media
We're
accounts.
on all the things at Kyle and Tim podcast.
So this is a fun endeavor that we've started really kind of getting serious the last 6 months. Getting serious.
Well, here's what I'll say. This is the most formal conversation me and you have had, but me and you have been having these types of conversations for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So this is why we, like, one of the probably several reasons we decided to do this. Because it was always, we should probably just start a podcast because we've been having this conversation for years.
Yeah. So the podcast is fun. I want to keep doing it. Just to kind of see where it goes. And I think we've already met really cool people just by interviewing them. So we'll keep doing that. Yeah, so that's one thing. I'm trying to figure out like what my next career move is. So that's kind of the next thing that's on my mind. Looking into blending my construction background with doing some sort of real estate development. That's one. Something I want to work on, but I keep kicking this down the curb. So I hope that the podcast helps with this. I'm sure it is a little bit, is my public speaking skills. I'd like to improve those. This over the next probably 6 months, I want to spend more time with my nephews than I have. Now that they're in town, like the first year and a half, like I didn't really spend that much time with them as much as I want to. Like, so I want to be more intentional about that. I want to help Emily and Cole out, and actually like babysit for the boys, and just kind of like get them to give them some freedom and give them some space from the boys, so they can have some alone time. So that's something I want to do in the next 6 months. Is like kind of get into a regular cadence of kind of watching the boys. Like, I don't know, I'm going to make up a thing like every third Sunday for 4 hours. Something like that.
Yeah.
Like I'll watch the boys. So I need to solidify that. Yeah, and we'll see what happens on the relationship front, like, so far that's going well. I'm excited about that. And we'll see if that kind of continues. I'd like it to.
About the gal you've been seeing who's
Yeah.
not in the area right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just filling in people who have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, they probably still don't, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's good. Don't need to know everything.
Right. And then, I would say spend as much time as I can with my mom and dad. Yeah. Spend as much time as I can with my mom right now and see how that goes, right? Just keep supporting her and staying engaged with that. Those are my main focus areas right now.
Righteous.
Yep.
Want to wrap this up?
Let's do it. Peace out.
Peace.